Around 10,000 years ago, a small wildcat stepped out of the wilderness and entered the human world. It did not follow a person back to their home. It was not captured. It was not trained. And it was never selectively bred to obey human commands. One day, it simply appeared at the edge of a human settlement and never truly left. Most people assume cats were domesticated in the same way as other animals. They imagine humans recognized their usefulness, deliberately tamed them, and gradually forced them into a dependent relationship. But that is not what actually happened. The true story of how cats entered our lives is far stranger and more fascinating. A small predator discovered a remarkable opportunity beside the most powerful species on Earth and exploited it better than almost any other animal. Over thousands of years, cats quietly adapted to life alongside us until they became one of the most successful creatures in history. The story begins around 10,000 BCE. In a region called the Fertile Crescent, stretching across parts of modern-day Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Egypt, something happened that permanently changed the course of humanity. For the first time, people began cultivating land, growing crops, storing grain, and establishing permanent settlements. Agriculture was born. But this revolutionary advancement also created a dangerous and unexpected problem. Grain stores became a paradise for rodents. Mice and rats flooded the earliest human settlements in numbers people had never encountered before. They did not merely eat the food. They contaminated it, damaged it, and destroyed supplies that entire communities depended on for survival. A severe infestation could draw a razor-thin line between surviving the winter and slowly starving to death. At the time, humans had no reliable solution. But something living just beyond the boundaries of civilization did. Felis silvestris libica, the Near Eastern wildcat, was a small, solitary predator that inhabited the same region. It was neither friendly nor naturally obedient. Although it looked surprisingly similar to many modern house cats, its behavior remained entirely wild and fiercely independent. Yet it possessed one extraordinary ability. It was an exceptional hunter of rodents. Some of these wildcats soon discovered that human settlements attracted enormous numbers of vulnerable prey. Where people stored grain, mice gathered like an endless moving feast. Hunting beside human granaries was far safer and more efficient than chasing scattered animals through the wilderness. The cats willing to tolerate human presence gained easier access to food, survived longer, and produced more offspring. Generation after generation, the least fearful cats began to thrive. The more cautious animals remained far from the settlements and missed the opportunities found near humans. No one deliberately domesticated these cats. Instead, the cats gradually adapted themselves to living beside us. Thousands of years later, scientists began analyzing DNA from wildcats, domestic cats, and archaeological remains discovered across different regions. They expected to uncover several separate origins for the modern house cat. Instead, the evidence pointed them toward one remarkable ancestral population. The overwhelming majority of domestic cats living today descend from wildcats that inhabited the Fertile Crescent approximately 10,000 years ago. In other words, humans did not go searching for cats. Cats were the ones that came looking for us. One of the most emotional pieces of evidence surfaced in 2004 when archaeologists uncovered a roughly 9,500-year-old grave in Cyprus. Inside the ancient burial site, they found the remains of a person laid to rest beside a cat. The two bodies had been positioned with great care, facing the same direction and separated by only a short distance. More than 9 millennia ago, someone considered that cat important enough to accompany a human into the afterlife. By that point, the connection between cats and people had already become far more than a simple arrangement built around food and pest control. But it was in ancient Egypt that cats reached a level of importance no other animal had achieved before. At first, the Egyptians valued them for extremely practical reasons. Egyptian homes were frequently threatened by venomous snakes, scorpions, rodents, and other creatures capable of killing a child or an adult within hours. Cats helped keep many of those deadly intruders away from houses and food supplies. They became silent guardians, patrolling homes like small predators assigned to protect everything inside. Over time, Egyptians stopped seeing them as merely useful animals. As cats gradually became powerful symbols of domestic safety and protection. That respect eventually deepened into something resembling sacred devotion. The goddess Bastet, often portrayed as either a cat or a woman with a feline head, represented protection, fertility, motherhood, and the security of the family. Her worship spread across ancient Egypt, and living cats inherited part of her sacred status. Harming or killing a cat was considered an extremely serious crime. Some historical accounts even suggest that the punishment could be severe, regardless of whether the animal's death had been intentional. When a household cat died naturally, many Egyptian families entered a period of genuine mourning. Some people reportedly shaved their eyebrows as a visible sign of grief. The dead animals were sometimes carefully mummified, wrapped in linen, and buried with extraordinary attention. Archaeologists have discovered enormous feline cemeteries containing the mummified remains of hundreds of thousands of cats. What began as a practical partnership against rodents had slowly transformed into something close to worship. Cats had entered human settlements as independent hunters. In ancient Egypt, they became protectors, companions, sacred symbols, and creatures believed to stand between the household and danger. But their journey was not going to end along the banks of the Nile. Soon, cats would begin traveling beyond Egypt and spreading across the ancient world. Eventually, cats began moving beyond Egypt and into the wider world. Genetic research on ancient feline remains has allowed scientists to reconstruct much of this remarkable global expansion. The evidence suggests that cats spread across continents in two major waves. The first wave traveled alongside early farming communities as agriculture expanded into new territories. Wherever farmers carried grain and established permanent settlements, rodents inevitably followed. And wherever large populations of rodents appeared, cats found another opportunity to settle beside humans. The second major wave began in Egypt, where cats had already gained enormous prestige and cultural importance. Egyptian cats boarded merchant vessels and traveled through busy ports across the Mediterranean. Sailors quickly realized that cats were more than unusual passengers. Every ship carried food, grain, rope, cloth, and other supplies that attracted rats from the moment the cargo reached the docks. A few rodents could quickly become a destructive infestation during a long voyage. They consumed stored food, contaminated drinking supplies, damaged valuable cargo, and even chewed through ropes essential for controlling the ship. Cats became a remarkably simple and effective solution. They protected supplies, hunted pests below deck, and required very little direct care from the crew. Their role was so valuable that ships began carrying them wherever maritime trade reached. But the genetic trail eventually led researchers to an unexpected destination. Ancient cat remains appeared in Viking settlements more than 1,000 years ago. Viking ships carried cats as essential members of their crews during long and dangerous voyages. These vessels needed large stores of grain and dried food to survive weeks or even months at sea. And wherever food was stored, rats were never far behind. Cats guarded those precious supplies, while also preventing rodents from damaging ropes, sails, and important parts of the wooden vessels. The same animal that had once hunted mice beside the granaries of early farmers was now crossing open oceans aboard Viking ships. However, the most extraordinary chapter of this story may not be historical at all. It may be biological. As cats spent more generations living around humans, subtle changes began appearing in their behavior and genetics. Comparisons between wild and domestic cats revealed differences connected to fear responses, aggression, memory, and the ability to tolerate other species. Their brains gradually adjusted to an entirely new reality. They learned to live near a large, unpredictable species without surrendering the independence that made them such effective hunters. Cats that reacted with less fear were more likely to remain near settlements and benefit from human protection. Those individuals survived more often and passed their calmer traits to future generations. Humans did not need to control every stage of this transformation. Natural selection was already doing much of the work. Even many familiar coat patterns seen in modern cats appeared long after the earliest stages of domestication. People eventually began favoring particular colors, markings, and fur patterns. Cats with those attractive features were protected, kept nearby, and given more opportunities to reproduce. Over time, those once uncommon traits spread through domestic cat populations. Yet beneath the new colors and calmer behavior, the ancient predator remained remarkably intact. Cats had adapted to the human world without allowing that world to completely reshape them. Then there is the meow, one of the most remarkable adaptations cats developed while living beside humans. Adult wildcats almost never meow at one another. This vocalization is mainly used by kittens trying to attract their mother's attention. Domestic cats, however, retained this juvenile behavior throughout their entire lives. They transformed a temporary childhood signal into a permanent language for communicating with people. Researchers eventually discovered something fascinating hidden inside those familiar sounds. Certain acoustic elements found in some meows fall within frequency ranges that the human brain interprets as unusually urgent. Those frequencies can resemble sounds found in a crying human baby. Our brains are naturally programmed to react quickly when we hear them. The sound is difficult to ignore because it reaches something ancient and instinctive inside us. Without deliberately planning it, cats developed an extraordinarily effective method of capturing human attention. A carefully chosen meow could persuade a person to provide food, open a door, offer protection, or simply look in the cat's direction. No other domesticated animal followed exactly the same evolutionary path. Dogs were shaped through thousands of years of deliberate human selection. Humans bred them for hunting, guarding, herding, companionship, and countless specialized tasks. Horses were trained and selected for transportation, warfare, agriculture, and heavy physical labor. Many domesticated species lost significant parts of their original wild behavior during this process. Cats took a very different route. They preserved much of their independence, hunting instinct, territorial nature, and the behavior of their wild ancestors. Even today, the genome of a domestic cat remains remarkably similar to that of the wild cats from which it descended. Cats changed only what was absolutely necessary. They reduced some of their fear of humans. They adjusted certain social behaviors. They modified the way they communicated, but they never surrendered the instincts that had made them successful predators. In exchange for these relatively small changes, cats gained shelter, food, safety, and protection from larger threats. They also achieved a level of global expansion that would have been impossible for almost any other small predator. Humans carried them across deserts, mountains, seas, and eventually entire oceans. Cats reached distant islands and continents their wild ancestors could never have entered alone. Today, hundreds of millions of cats live beside humans across every inhabited continent on Earth. The entire story began roughly 10,000 years ago when a wildcat approached a granary in search of a few mice. That animal could never have understood the consequences of its decision. Yet that small step marked the beginning of one of the most extraordinary partnerships in natural history. Cats did not conquer humans through strength, and humans never completely conquered cats through control. Instead, the two species formed an unusual alliance in which both sides gained something valuable. We offered cats warmth, reliable food, protection, and access to the entire planet. They offered us pest control, companionship, fascination, and a presence that eventually became inseparable from human life. Perhaps that is the secret behind their extraordinary success. Cats discovered the perfect way to live beside us without ever fully belonging to us. They adapted to the human world while never truly giving up what they had always been. And after thousands of years inside our homes, they remain exactly what first approached those ancient granaries: small, independent predators that chose to stay.